Hello, MotoAmerica fans. It's time for another episode of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you may even learn something from this unlikely pair and their special guest. The mic is yours, Paul and Sean.
Good morning, everybody. This is Paul Carruthers, and I'm joined as always by Sean Bice on our weekly MotoAmerica podcast, Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. And today we've got a special guest, Sean, that I'm excited for. And actually, it's kind of weird that we've been doing the podcast for so long, and we've never had MotoAmerica's Chuck Aksland on. Everybody in the paddock would know Chuck. He's the COO of MotoAmerica. And obviously, he's one of the four partners and has been with MotoAmerica since we started. So, Sean, first of all, before we bring Chuck on, how's everything with you?
Well, man, it's great. Only a couple of days left in 2021, and as you know, Paul, I keep screwing up what year it is when I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's weird.
I don't know what my problem is. I can't get it straight. I think I'll be ready. Like you said, a lot of people can't remember to change it to 2022. I've been thinking 2022 so much that I keep calling like Jake Gagne the 2022 champion. So
yeah, I saw that and I'm like, what the hell is he doing? With me, it's the opposite. I told you, it's like I'll be still right in 2021 for a while, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if
you're sort of ahead of the game.
I think it's the even years. I know when my birthday is on an odd year, you know, for how old I am, I have trouble with that. I don't know what it's some kind of even and odd type thing, but anyway, hey, I want to mention about this guest we got on, man. It took us long enough to get him on, but we finally have the mayor of the paddock. That's so right. Happy.
We've reeled him in.
We did. He had to make sure we were real.
Well, that's it. You know, I mean, he wanted to make sure that we were successful enough that it was worth his time to come on.
Yes.
Hey, before we get started, I wanted to do a quick shout out to the Hayden family. Earl, who's the patriarch of the family, died yesterday. He's been fighting cancer for a long time, and I think anybody that's ever come in contact with him knows what a special person he was and how important he was really to our sport with the boys that he raised that raced and his daughters raced. And they're just it'd be hard to not call them the first family of American motorcycle racing, you know, because they did everything and he was always there. And he's one of those guys that, you've never heard anybody say a bad thing about him, just because I don't think there is a bad thing you can say about him. So I just wanted to say that, you know, everybody at MotoAmerica is thinking of the Hayden family. Obviously, Roger works with us a lot, and we see him at every race, and he does our MotoAmerica Live Plus. And it's always, you know, there's always a Hayden of some sort in our paddock, and there has been for, you know, almost as long as I can remember. So anyway, our thoughts and prayers are with the family, and hopefully they're doing okay. It's not an easy situation by any means, but I think they know that he passed peacefully and he passed at the house. So I think that's all you could want at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing because what an outpouring of condolences and messages on social media from all around the world, though. I've been reading a lot. I'm sure you saw them too, Paul. It's incredible. Everybody, you know, and everybody says the same thing about Earl, you know, that he always left you with a smile on your face when you talked to him, and, you know, everything about him was incredible. That the clipboard he used to carry with all the stopwatches on it and stuff. I mean, just a tremendous guy.
I was looking back at my text chain with him because it's funny. Every Father's Day or Christmas or birthday, we'd always text each other, you know, Happy Father's Day. And he would always have like the little squirrel, you know, in his signature and stuff. So it was kind of fun to look back on that today because he was, obviously a very good family man, and those kids came first no matter what. And you can tell, obviously, with the success that they had, that things worked out well for them. So anyway, we're thinking of them today.
For sure.
Okay, so let's talk about Chuck a little bit. My situation with Chuck is, we've known each other since we were both kids in the AMA paddock. You know, our fathers both worked with Kenny Roberts. You know, Bud mostly did dirt track stuff. My dad did the road race stuff. Then Bud came and worked with my dad on the road race stuff. And they obviously had tons of success together. So I got to know Chuck then when we were just, little brats, riding mini bikes around the paddock and trying not to let Bill Boyce take them away from us. But and it's ironically enough, Kenny Roberts is having his 70th birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday to him. But he's sort of the person that brought Chuck and I together in a roundabout way. And then obviously I worked with Chuck a bit during my Cycle News days when he worked for Kenny again and was running his Grand Prix team. So I would see him periodically. He got me really drunk one time in Spain, I think it was, on limoncello. I still can't smell it without getting sick. So I'll always remember that as well. But and then here we've come full circle. We both work at MotoAmerica. He's obviously one of the 4 partners. So we see each other quite often, and we're obviously like you, we're on calls and stuff. So we interact on a daily or weekly basis. So welcome to the show, Chuck. Finally.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me on. It's only taken me 7 years to get here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think it. I mean, that's 7. So we're starting what will be our 8th season. That to me is just mind-boggling. It seems, well, sometimes it seems like 20 years ago, and sometimes it seems like yesterday. But at first, I mean, talk a little bit about, the fact that this thing got started in 2000 and the end of 2014, and 2015 was our first season. And I mean, we really have come pretty damn far.
Yeah, and it really has gone by fast, Paul. I mean, I remember I was working at COTA, when I came back from running Kenny's team, and where I was based in England. Basically, me and my family lived there for, I think it was 11 or 12 years. We came back in 2007, or 2007 might have been our last year competing. 2008 we came back, and I was managing a couple of riders. Blake Young, Roger Hayden. I still have one rider on the books, and he's been pretty successful lately. Kind of got beat a little bit this year, but he's going to come back strong next year. That'd be Jonathan Ray.
Yeah, that's not a bad one to have.
Not a bad one.
No, it's Jonathan. I started working with him when I was in England, and or just before I left, I guess. I got to know him because actually a lot of people don't know, but we had him earmarked to do a wild card at Donington Park in 2007. I think that was the year Curtis rode for us. That was the 800 era. And we were struggling with that. Kenny Jr. Was struggling with it. And we had Jonathan basically earmarked and got permission from Honda Japan, and we're going to have Jonathan do a wild card at Donington Park. He still has the leathers, had them made up, and at the last minute, somebody pulled the plug on it. Didn't like the idea.
Wow.
But he's a great guy, good guy to work with, super determined. How he gets motivated every year to do what he does, I don't know, but he does. He finds that drive, and he and his family, they're all great to work with. And I talk to him more during the off season than during the season. He's got enough people around him at the races, obviously, that doesn't really need me interfering, but he knows I'm watching every race. And so that's my one rider that's left that I'm working with.
What a great one to have. He just seems like a totally nice guy, Chuck, all the time. I mean, even when he talked with Garrett in the beginning of the year with stuff, I mean, he handled that so well with Garrett, and everything seemed fine there. And I mean, I don't ever see him get too upset. Is he that chill all the time?
He flare. I've seen him flare up a couple times, but it's more as normal racers do. There's circumstances that happen, and frustration comes out. But it's it's all in his purpose to be a winning rider and to be a champion. And at the track, off track, he really appreciates his fans. He appreciates his sponsors. He's on a social media. If you follow that, he's a well-rounded family guy, very well spoken, and yeah, he's a super guy.
So Chuck, let's talk a little bit about this MotoAmerica thing. You had mentioned about you had worked with Blake Young and with Roger. So you you had your eyes on what AMA racing was, Superbike racing and our racing was before you guys took over. So it sounds like you were pretty well versed in what was going on and knew the players. Is that right?
To some extent, sure. As Paul said, in the introduction, we've both been around AMA racing since we were kids.
Right.
Going back to, I don't know if Paul will remember this or not, but for some reason, one of the first memories I have of Paul is me and Paul and Cal Rayburn Jr. were racing bicycles in the tunnels at Ontario Motor Speedway.
Exactly.
You remember that?
Yep.
So we've kind of both, I've grown up in the sport and so obviously, Skip Aksland's my uncle. He's a pretty good racer in his day, and so it's not like I ever went away from AMA racing. Even when I was in Europe running Kenny stuff, I always kept track of what was going on. And then when I came back and got more involved in it with the riders, I was going to a few of the races. So yeah, I don't know if I had my finger on the pulse of the sport, but I certainly was aware of what was going on.
This is Paul. I'm sure you know this, but I've talked to you about this before, and I got to just ask this question, Chuck. This is a little off topic, but so you mentioned Skip, and you probably know where I'm going with this. For the longest time, I thought he was your brother. My God, I didn't understand it. I mean, I still don't really get it. I've met your dad. I've met Skip. Skip is a little older than you, but not that much older. Am I right or am I wrong about that?
No, he's in between me and Kenny, I guess, somewhere. I think
Okay.
Kenny's 12 years older than me, and Skip's maybe 8. I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah. So obviously, Skip is brothers with my dad, Bud.
Right. And I always thought Skip was your brother, but Bud, he and your did you ever know your grandfather, Bud and Skip's dad?
Oh yeah, my grandfather Cliff Aksland. Yeah. So he was. And that's kind of where a lot of this got started. My grandfather really had the first ranch, and Kenny, my dad had a little shop there. We had a short track and a motocross track, and Kenny spent a lot of time out there riding. My grandfather's short track had a fence around it. I mean, it was pretty proper, had a TT track in the middle, kind of like what Kenny emulated at his ranch. But my grandfather was unique. We lived in Manteca, California, and it's right in the heart of almond country. And so my grandfather got this idea to keep moisture in the track. He would take almond holes and dig up the racetrack and put the almond holes in the dirt. Then when you watered the track, the almond holes held the moisture.
Wow.
And Kenny could go around there dragging his handlebar in the dirt. It had so much grip. It was pretty cool.
So, and the other part of this too, so your grandfather and your dad had a Suzuki dealership together. Is that right? And then your dad took it over maybe more, or is that?
My dad's name is actually Cliff, and everybody called him Bud. So he's Cliff Aksland Jr.
Okay.
And so it was his Suzuki. He sold Suzukis and Bultacos, I think. And yeah, that's how the relationship with Kenny kind of started. When Kenny was 14, my dad sponsored him, helped him with parts and helped him with things. And in return, Kenny would sweep the floor of my dad's shop and go get lunch.
There you go.
And here we are,
So this is the thing that's interesting, and we'll get back to MotoAmerica in a minute, but I need to understand this too. So there was your dad Suzuki dealership, and Kenny was riding Hodakas, I guess, and Tohatsus and things, and then he started racing a Suzuki that I understand kind of came from your dad, and he raced at the Cow Palace. And so then there's you, and there's Skip, and then there's Wayne. Okay, so Skip and Kenny kind of were around together, and Skip raced a lot. Wayne and you raced a lot together, but it ended up being the two non-Akslands are the ones that kind of, I don't want to say went further, Chuck, but you know what I mean? I mean, it's kind of interesting that, was there any weirdness between either you towards Wayne or Skip towards Kenny that, hey, these non-family members have kind of gone farther in this whole thing than we did as far as the racing part of it? I mean,
no, I think, Kenny, like I said, Kenny, I grew up around Kenny. Kenny is still, the Robertses and the Akslands. I think we're more family and friends than, work colleagues, so to speak. And
Right.
And so Skip and Kenny, they grew up, they raced a lot together. I think when Kenny went to Europe with Kel, in 78, Skip was probably the best road racer in the States at that time when Kenny left. And, he was quite successful. And if it wasn't for some injuries, he, probably would have been Grand National Champion or won a lot more races. He won, a mile race, and he won a few road races. So he was pretty good. But it's interesting because, Kenny and Skip raced together a lot, but I think Wayne also raced with Skip a couple times. And so, yeah, I mean, there's no animosity there at all. I went to Europe with Kenny in 1983. At that time, I was racing motocross, local motocrosses, and it was a lot easier to get support to be a motocross racer back in those days. And so I was focused on that, but Kenny needed somebody to help train for his last year in Europe. And so I basically went and stayed with him, and we rode every day and ran every day and worked out. And he had just gone through a divorce, and so he needed some help in Europe. So I went over with him for the first half of the season in 83. And then when I came back, I thought, I'll try and road race. And so I did, I rode about 3 club races. Then we built this Delta Box TZ250 in his garage, which I don't know why we did that, to be honest, but we went to Daytona. And so my 4th road race ever was, at Daytona in the 250 race. And me and Wayne were teammates. Wayne was riding a stock bike and I was riding this homemade job. And Wayne won, and I ended up getting 8th or something like that. So, I raced a 250 for, I think, 2 years, and then we got a super bike. And at that time, as you guys well remember, I think Fred Merkel was probably the only guy getting paid here in the States. And I kind of gave myself 3 years to make it or not. And, I had a good run. It was fun, and basically stopped. I think my last race was 86.
You were number 53, right, Chuck?
I was 53 the first year, and then 14 in 1985. I was number 14 on the 250, and then on the superbike I was number 141.
Okay. Wow, I didn't realize you raced superbike, Paul. I had no idea. So there's something I've learned already in this podcast.
Well, I think there's a difference between racing and riding. I probably rode it more than raced it.
You did your homework, John.
I think I raced it. I had 3 or 4 races. We had some troubles with it. It was funny because, obviously we were all very close to Yamaha, and Jimmy and I think John had the factory bikes. And when we got our super bike, we got all the engine pieces for the super bike kit. So basically we almost had like what their bikes were, but nobody told us about the frame bracing part of it. So all I remember is that thing just wobbling over turn 1 at Laguna, and being a pretty scary experience, actually.
So is it true? Sorry, Paul, I got one more, and then I promise, and then I'll come back with more later. But Paul, I got to find out if this is true. Chuck, is it true that when you raced with Wayne, that you would actually have to come in and work on his bike, and then once he went back out there, then you could go back out on the track? Is that fable, or is that actually true?
No, so what happened was 84 is when I rode at Daytona. I rode a couple of the West Coast races, and then in 85, obviously Wayne was in Europe in 84 with Kenny's team, and then 85 he came back and rode for Bob McLean and Tim O'Sullivan. Stuart Toomey ran the program, and Stuart knew my dad quite well, and Stuart and Bob said, hey, if you want to do the races back east, put your bike in the back, you can drive the truck and help out at the track. Well, when we got to the track, yeah, my job was to help work on Wayne's 250, and I was racing against him. So I would go out, I was by myself, I would ride, go out for practice and come in and put my bike on the stand and start working on Wayne's bike. So that's true, actually.
Amazing.
Wayne would go out and win the race or get in the top 3, and I would get like 8th. I was a good 7th, 8th place rider back then. But.
Well, Sean, I kind of appreciate the fact that Chuck kind of skipped over a little bit, which makes me happy because he did come down to, I was racing I was racing TT at this place called Speedway 117, which is in Chula Vista, which was, a stone's throw from Tijuana. south of San Diego. So I was racing there. I think it was weekly. I don't know. It might have been Friday nights or Saturday nights or whatever. So I started racing there weekly, and freaking Chuck came down from Northern California and kicked my ass. So
And I still have the newspaper clipping, Sean.
yeah,
So
He
if Paul
does.
ever
He does.
goes in the
He-
wrong direction, I just pull out that clipping to.
it's in his
show him that-
wallet, Sean. It's in his wallet. But I think, like, I can't remember. I think I had a tire spin on the rim, or my one-cylinder bike started running on one cylinder or something. But you know, there was some kind of excuse there. I just can't remember what it was.
I remember you got the whole shot and I passed you like on lap 2, and then I never saw you again. So I'm not sure what happened to you.
Like I said, there was some issues. I just don't remember what they were. It was definitely mechanical. Well, Sean, let's talk about some MotoAmerica stuff. You go for it.
Yeah, we need to get back and talk about that. So I want to ask about and bring up, you know, in this series history, we've had a billion people ask questions, or a billion questions about, you know, when we're going to go back to this track, that track. You know, some people even will ask about Loudon, but some people ask Mid-Ohio, but certainly they always ask about Daytona. And I know that it's something that we wanted to try to do. And now that we've announced that we're going back and we've got a pretty full slate of racing that's coming up there, you know, now we're getting some people that are still asking why we don't have super bikes and all that. But I was thinking about this, Chuck, and it's a question I want to ask you. So this new Super Sport next generation that's come out, where that, you know, and I'm going to bring up that Ducati 955. Well, of course, it wasn't that long ago that a Ducati 955 V-twin was in fact a super bike. And one of the reasons they don't race super bikes is somewhat to do with the tires and somewhat to do with the speed. But I've got to think the tire technology has improved so much at this point that that's probably why a Suzuki 955 can race in a 200. But the super bikes now are just so much more powerful than they were certainly in the 750 era. So is it still a case of, is it the tires? Is it the walls? What is it about Superbike not being able to be in the 200?
I think there's a number of different things, Sean. You know, when we took over the series, it was in mid-September, it might have been September 5th or something like that, if I recall. And I don't know if you remember back then, DMG, they had already announced that they were going to go back to superbikes at Daytona. And so we took the series over in September, and there was already a tire test scheduled for October. And so that was the first issue I had to deal with, is what are we going to do with the 200?
Wow.
And then getting, you know, feedback. There was all kinds of things, you know, that came up, like, you know, the speedway itself doesn't want bikes going over 200 miles an hour. Then you would talk to somebody at DMG, and it was like, well, we've never heard that, you know. So it's just getting information all over the place. But kind of then the consensus was just keep going with the 600s. If you go back to thousands, yeah, there were tire concerns. There were people having to, you know, make new refueling rigs if you went back to super bikes, and you know, basically at that time, it was just like, it was easier for us to focus on being a sprint racing series to, you know, obviously the 200's not a sprint race. Well, it's kind of turning into one, but, you know, it was outside our realm, and really there was not a clear path we didn't see. So it was just easier to not deal with it, I guess, so to speak. And so, you know, it's now the tradition's rolled on with the super sport bikes, the 600s. And, you know, when the idea of the new generation super sport rules came out, I kind of thought, you know, it's just like you alluded, you know, 955, they are almost like super bikes again. Right. But with the new gen rules, there was opportunity for more manufacturers. And I just thought the timing was right to take a look at it again. And, you know, the international contingency with Ducati wanting to get back into it, with Triumph being able to participate. We've already seen a lot of interest from British riders and international riders asking questions about coming over to compete. So I think it just felt like the timing was right with the new stuff coming on board. And
of course, the one thing we've tried to emphasize is we're following something that the FIM has wanted to do. So British Superbike is doing it, and other organizations around the world. It's not just something that MotoAmerica has decided that they're doing this super sport next generation. It's a global initiative, correct?
No, that's 100% right. And we're really relying on the FIM and their balancing procedures and rules. They're the ones that are running all the engines and bikes on dynos and coming up with the algorithms and the formulas to balance them. And so we're relying on them to do that. We will have, the FIM guys at Daytona, because that'll really be the first run of this new gen idea, I think. So yeah, it's and I could see this as a path forward. I mean, if the rules are the same and one of our super sport riders here shows a lot of promise, there's no reason he couldn't go over there on a super sport program too. Kind of like what, when Garrett going to World Superbike, our bikes are the most similar of any national series to a World Superbike level bike. And so the transition was, I think, easier for him going from here to there, and maybe that'll be the case for super sport riders too down the road.
One thing regarding Daytona, and I'm reminded of this with this series that Paul's doing related to, the past 30 years of superbike racing at Daytona, is the fact that, a lot of times the race is won on that last lap with drafting. And it brings up this idea that Daytona is such an anomaly with the way the track configuration is I would imagine almost no amount of algorithm and balancing is going to get it just right. So to your point about having some of the FIM people there at Daytona, I'm sure there's going to have to be some balancing on the fly there, just because Daytona is unlike any other track in the world. Would you say that's true, Chuck?
Yeah, I think it's, I hope that it all turns out, balanced fairly and properly, but, with so many different types of machinery, it's, I think they'll get close personally, but we do have them there in case something has to happen on the fly, which we don't know. We hope that's not the case, and their computers and ideas are right, and we'll go from there. But what I must say, I went out to the 200 last year, and because I hadn't been in a long time, but I'll tell you what, when you drive through that tunnel and see motorcycles up on the bank, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it gives you the chills.
It's fun. Yeah, it's cool.
And plus, I think it's probably not a bad place to start this deal, because it's kind of like you're putting all those motorcycles on the dyno together, because that's kind of what Daytona is.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
I mean, the stuff will show up quick.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, I want to talk to you a little bit about the fact that, like myself, I came from within the paddock working for Cycle News to actually working for MotoAmerica, so coming at things from the other side. I know Wayne did as well, and you had some experience from sort of inside the gates with your job at COTA. Has this been more challenging than you thought it would be, or is this kind of what you expected?
I would say this is probably one of the most difficult things I've undertaken, to be honest, especially
I was thinking you would say that, because
and as you know, Paul, I've been through a lot, trying to build your own Grand Prix bike to go race against Honda. I oversaw all that program with both the 2-stroke and the 4-strokes in England. And then, doing the racetrack, that just came out of the blue. I turned up was invited to come to take a look by a guy named Tavo Hellman, who was at that time a friend of Kevin Schwantz's. And he, invited me to come out. I talked to him beforehand and ended up getting the job as the 4th person involved with the Circuit of the Americas. And, the first meeting I went to, there were like 50 construction guys around, and there were 4 people from the owner's side, me being one of them. The other 3 had no experience in motorsports at all, or racetrack side. They were the kind of the backup for the financiers. And so the construction guys are going, okay, who's responsible for the temporary grandstands? And they would point and say, well, that's the owner's side. And so I just raised my hand. So I raised my hand for pretty much everything, and left with this big list, with medical, marshals, trash, the special infrastructure that goes in for the electronics, the whole thing. And so I just had this list, and because of my contacts through racing and the knowledge, experience I gained, I just kind of put it all together. But that again gave me another perspective from, okay, I understand kind of what tracks go through. I understand what teams go through. I raced a little bit, so I think it kind of gave me a well-rounded perspective for MotoAmerica.
So you said it was more challenging than you thought. What really is it? Can you say, is there like, what's the biggest challenge, or what's been the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge initially, when in the very beginning, if you remember, we took over the series in September. When it was announced, Wayne and I talk on the phone. We still do. We talk 2 or 3 times every day. But at that time, we couldn't even call each other because our phones were just, you couldn't put them down. So many people want to know what was going on and this and that. But we had to, at that time, had to develop a schedule, had to come up with the philosophy of the rules, which, we relied on decided to go down the route of trying to stay as close to FIM rules as we could. But we had to translate all that into kind of American needs. And, it wasn't until we got really Nicole Cox on board and I basically went in and said, here's what we're doing with the rules. And here's an operations manual of how MotoGP runs. And let's translate this into a formula that works and has evolved into MotoAmerica. So that first year was pretty, it was just head down and really hardly taking a breath, to be honest. So the first year was probably the most challenging. And then, we had so many people wondering, why are you doing this with the rules, trying to answer questions, trying to defend yourself and so forth. And at the end of the day, Wayne, myself, and, you guys are involved sometimes in it, but, we have to do what we think is best for MotoAmerica in the series. And, we get advice from a lot of different people, but at the end of the day, we make a decision, and sometimes that decision leads to, to a lot of comments, and sometimes it doesn't. So probably dealing with the comments and the justification of some of the stuff we do, that certainly doesn't make it easy.
Yeah, you got to have some thick skin.
Got to have some thick skin. But I think probably all the years I worked with Kenny, anybody that knows Kenny kind of have to have thick skin to be around him for that long.
Yeah, you're probably 2-inch leather skin at this point.
Oh, one of the things, Chuck, that we know, Paul and I intimately know about what you've done with MotoAmerica, aside from all the things you've done, is the TV stuff. And I don't know if the public really, or the fans really realize that your involvement in the TV, from our involvement with our production team and Larry Myers, and having in kind of an quote unquote in-house production team, but what you've done to get Live Plus, our streaming service, and negotiating with a lot of the networks. It's been interesting for me to see you involved in that, and you're doing a great job with it. And I'm not just blowing smoke up your butt, but I want to know, like, how the heck did it end up that you became sort of the TV czar for us to handle everything? How did that happen?
I guess it's in a way similar to what happened at COTA. I just sort of did it, raised my hand and went for it. It needed to be done. And I'm not shy to pick up the phone and start asking questions. So, that's what happened. We, the first year, if you remember, we had a tape program on CBS Sports, and really we needed more than that. The MotoGP series was covered by BN Sports. And so we went down there, and with Dorna's help, we had our races on BN Sports, and then that relationship ended. And then it was like, okay, what are we going to do now? And so I just started picking up the phone and looking on LinkedIn and reading old press releases and finding who the contacts at the networks were, and made contact and went for it, and then we decided to do Live Plus, and I just did the research and found what I thought was the best provider or the best service to help us with that, and boom, there we are. And now we just launched MotoAmerica TV, and we have one other project that'll be announced here in the next couple months probably. But I think with Richard and Terry and Wayne, it's and kind of where we are now. I think we're fortunate, one, because they let me do these things. It's always good experience, to venture into new arenas. But I think it's also a testament to what we've done to build up the foundation of the series, with the rules and the processes that we have, and all the stuff that Nicole takes care of for me. It allows me to do these other things too.
What a time it is for TV too, Chuck. I mean, it's in such flux and changing all the time right now. I mean, we occasionally will have fans will say stuff like, when we talk about our TV package, or we make an announcement of what we're doing, or talk about Live Plus, we'll have commentary about, well, why isn't all the racing on Speed Channel like it used to be? Well, Speed Channel isn't around anymore because that's not the way TV is anymore. I mean, just yesterday I started watching Ted Lasso on Apple TV. Everybody's consuming their television differently now, and you can't really think in terms of the way it used to be with channels and things like that. So it's got to be hard with this moving target for you to really keep track of, there's the streaming component, there's the paid television component, there's this MotoAmerica TV thing as well that you've got going. I mean, how do you not only deal with the technology, but kind of keep abreast of what's the right thing to do out there in terms of the way consumers want to watch our racing?
Well, I think kind of my theory on it is, first, you try and make access to MotoAmerica, whether it's older races or live races, make access easy for people that want to watch it. But we have, well, now I think next year we're going to have 8 different types of motorcycle classes, in our series. So that provides a lot of different content, and and again, and kind of spreading it around. And there's disagreements, and there's pros and cons, I guess, to what the philosophy is that I've had. But you could watch Superbikes on Fox Sports, you could watch Super Sport on MAV TV, you could watch the other programming, the other races on other places. You could wait a week and watch it on YouTube. Some of our races we put on Facebook, but we have that one component that if you want to watch all the races in one place, that's available to you as well. So, by having it spread out on all these channels, if you happen to catch one super sport race and you want to watch something else, then hopefully you've had that exposure to MotoAmerica, and you'll seek out and find where the other classes are as well.
I want to talk about King of the Baggers a little bit. It's weird to think about it, but it's still considered last year when it debuted. Of course, it's been 2 years if you think about seasons, but I distinctly remember when we were at Laguna Seca 2 years ago, or last year it was, and Paul, we went out on that patio where we were in the media center and watched those King of the Baggers go around, and first thing we'd seen, and it was like unlike something we'd ever seen before, and it's picked up steam. It's the teams, the sponsors, the riders are a lot more involved. We got bigger grids. We're going to have more racing next year. I guess I had a bit of I wasn't sure, it was like, oh my God, this is so different. And now it's genuinely interesting to the point where sometimes I think it almost doesn't matter what you're racing. And I don't mean to be little King of the Baggers or any other kind of road racing, but it is in itself an absolute amazing show to watch. Is King of the Baggers what you thought it was going to be, or do you think it's actually better than what you thought it was going to be?
I probably, like you guys thought, had no idea what it was going to be, especially that first race at Laguna Seca, because not only are you taking something that hasn't been raced before, like they're racing them now, but you had a group of teams or bike builders that hadn't really been involved in racing, so, simple stuff about staying on schedule, or, tire warmers or transponder, it was like you're educating a completely different genre, to participate. But it's much better now than I ever probably thought it would be. The teams that are involved are professional. They seek out, questions when they need answers. To see what guys like Kyle and Tyler O'Hara and those guys actually do on these bikes, it really, to me, showcases how good of riders that they are, because they're doing things you wouldn't imagine, or, doesn't look normal, to be doing on these bikes. But no, the cooperation we've had with everybody, it's really evolved, and I think it's in a good place. And Mission Foods coming on board to sponsor the class again is great, and we're adding a little bit more flavor to it this year with the Mission Challenge. So It's going to be a minimum 3-lap race with the top 6 qualifiers to determine the grid position for the races, and with $5,000 on tap to the winner. So that's going to be, again, it's another thing. I'm not quite sure how it's going to turn out, but it's going to be exciting. so yeah, I mean, it's I think it's something that unique that's going to continue to evolve and just progress and get better. And we get comments from people in Europe that say, they see a lot of superbike racing, but they never see baggers racing. So everybody watches it no matter what, because it's so unique. So that's a good thing.
Yep.
Chuck, I think you'll agree, and Sean, you as well, but I think one of the things that makes MotoAmerica work as well as it does is how, I guess, addicted to the sport that we all are.
Yeah.
When Sean brought up King of the Baggers, I really questioned that. I'm like, oh my God, because I'm a bit of a purist, as I think we all are or were. And then when we saw King of the Baggers, that first time when they came over the hill at turn 1 there at Laguna Seca, I was like, holy crap, this is good. And but back to my original point, I think what makes MotoAmerica work is the fact that, I mean, and I see it, when I'm at those races and I see the partners and I see everybody involved. And the bottom line is, when motorcycle races start and they're on track, all of us are glued to what's going on, and we're excited, and we're basically turned into fans at that point. Don't you think that has a lot to do with how successful we've been and how things work within the company?
Yeah, 100%, Paul. I think at the end of the day, we're all race fans, and I want, like I said, we're all sitting there, myself, Wayne, Richard, Terry, we all watch every race, and it's probably not, there are other participants in the paddock that probably don't watch it as much as we do, but we're not only watching it just to see how it transpires, we're watching it because we're fans. It's fun racing, and now we have such a diverse amount of classes, with sport bikes and the Royal Enfield Build Train Race, and King of the Baggers, and the Hooligans coming on board for a few events. I mean, the Hooligans, it was like going back in time to the Baggers. We didn't know what that was going to be, and we watched it at Laguna, and some people liked it and some didn't, and it was funny because it's kind of debate. I thought the racing was good in the end between Fillmore and DeBrino, but my wife Debbie, she was like, wow, she really enjoyed it because she kept using this word raw. That's like raw racing. It's just there's no fairings. It's just the guy on the bike, and they're loud, and she just thought it was cool. So I think we got a little bit of something for everybody. And at the end of the day, that makes the party bigger. The more motorcyclists we can get involved in coming to our events and watching these, whether you're a Baggers fan, you're going to be exposed to superbikes. Whether you're a superbike fan, you're going to be exposed to Hooligans or Baggers, or the Build Train Race. So I think it just makes a good experience, especially our events in person.
Yeah, and I think that's been my response to people that have issues with whatever class it is they have issues with. It's like, we didn't take anything away to do Baggers. We've added Baggers, we've added Hooligans, like you said, at certain rounds, we've added this and that, but we haven't taken away anything. So if that's not something you enjoy or not something you want to partake in, you don't have to, but you're not losing what you came for. We still have, we have all those classes. So there's something for everybody there.
No, for sure. And if you don't want to watch an event, go buy a t-shirt or go watch the stunt show, or, go watch, there's a lot of other things to do as well. So
I want to talk about another class that sort of, I don't know, came out of nowhere. And it's pretty much my favorite race class. I think outside of Superbike, Superbike's still the premier class and love it the most and all that, but it's Twins Cup, Chuck. And when it came first when it originated, I remember a while back, we've had Josh Hayes on our podcast a few times, and he was on shortly after that was announced. And I know he had an opinion for you guys when you were planning to have it. And we talked to him about it. I actually asked him about it on that podcast. And this is several years ago, or at least a couple years ago. And he didn't even want to talk about it. He was not real happy about it the whole bit. And I know he angered a few Twins Cup riders, and a few of them out of respect for a 4-time Superbike champion just kind of said, well, okay, I guess that's his opinion. But I would think that he's even going to change now, or has changed his opinion of that class. I personally love it. I never thought it was going to be a stepping stone to super sport, but there's some teams and riders who haven't announced yet, but we know for a fact coming down the pike, there's going to be some riders that were in Junior Cup who are going to race in Twins Cup. And we saw it last year with some of the riders racing in Twins Cup prior to going to super sport. I mean, Rocco Landers is a perfect example, but I guess I never thought it was going to be that kind of a class. But that's what it's become. Did you anticipate that? And what do you think about it being a stepping stone like that?
Well, I think I'm glad it's evolved into that and given people options. When we first came up with the idea, I mean, and if living in the UK for so long, you're exposed a lot to the road racing, Northwest 200 and all that kind of stuff. And they had a Twins class over there, and I was always kind of intrigued with it because I think they were 650 Kawasaki's, but they looked like road racers. They had open body work, so they had fairings. And then when we, with MotoAmerica, I think it was the second year or third year, James Morris, our, former technical director, he had a bike in the back of his pickup that had a fairing on it. It looked like a 250 road racer. And it's like, what is that? And he says, well, it's the FC07 with a fairing on it. And so we started talking about it, and he said there were some club racers that ran them. And to me, the way that we devised the class, a lot of our classes are kind of locked down on, what you could tune, what you could modify, what you could change. And, like if Paul's dad, Kel, or my dad was in racing, involved, they like to tinker. They like to make things. They like to, try and make the bike better. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, obviously. But, with Superbike, Super Sport, a lot of those are locked down to where you can't have that freedom. And we thought, well, this could be a class where just let people do what they want. And so that's kind of where it started. And James, recommended put the limitation, they get to run a stock frame basically, and a few other things. And so, yeah, the first year, I remember Wayne, we went to Road Atlanta. I think there were 6 or 7 on the grid, kind of like baggers the first time last year. But so he's like, what are you doing here? And it's evolved. And, the second race, we had a lot more, and the equipment's gotten better. And yeah, from Junior Cup, sometimes I think from Junior Cup to Super Sport, whether it's an ability jump too far or a cost jump too far, that the Twins has seemed to fill that slot. And I've heard some of the teams, some of the riders that are coming back to it next year. It's going to be a real dogfight. I think every race, it's going to be fun to watch.
Well, here's
Sean,
thing.
real quick. I can tell you he was scared at Road Atlanta. he should take credit for it now, but I know Chuck pushed pretty hard for that class. And I also know when there was like 6 or 7 or 8 of them at that first race, I know Wayne gave him a little bit of crap there. So,
I mean, for me, the class, I mean, not only the stepping stone part of it, but to what you said, Chuck, the tuner class part of it, and the being able to do some things with that class. I mean, it's just an interesting thing to watch. And one of the things that's been weird about it is, I don't know if you were prophetic about this or what happened, but so there was an FC07 in the back of James Morris's truck. At the time, there was an SV650 and there was a Kawasaki twin. Well, lo and behold, after a couple of years of Twins Cup, Aprilia came out with a proper Twins Cup sport bike. Yamaha turned the FC07 into an R7 sport bike, and we actually have proper fully faired sport bikes right off the showroom floor that are legitimately enabled to be in Twins Cup. So how did that happen? I mean, did Twins Cup, is it chicken or the egg? Did Twins Cup create that for the manufacturers, or did we just get in ahead of time? How did it end up that all came together that way, do you think?
Well, working with motorcycle manufacturers, they have a pretty long planning cycle. So I think it was probably a little bit by chance, and maybe some of the models got modified a little bit to suit the race side of it. A pro is a little bit different. They probably work a little bit faster and saw an opportunity there. But a twin cylinder motorcycle and the price point for them, I think is attractive for manufacturers to build and to sell. So if you turn them into a road racer or whatever, I remember might have been John Ulrich telling me that when one of the Suzuki executives came to Laguna Seca the first year we were running them, the guy couldn't believe that we were racing them. It's like, you're not supposed to race that bike. It's not it's not going to work. And but it's a good platform for a manufacturer. It's a good middle of the road power level if you're just going to get into motorcycle riding. So yeah, I'd like to take credit for that evolution, but really I don't think we probably had much to do with it.
So I got a couple big questions for you, Chuck. This next one,
Chuck.
Big ones, big questions.
Well, they're not hard for me to ask, but they're hard. They may be hard to answer because I don't know what you're going to say, and it's not because they're controversial. But rather than give you a huge preliminary on it, let me just come out with it. So the other day I wrote this story about the 1970 Daytona 200 and the fact that Honda had come out with this CB 750 in '69, and they needed to market it, and they hadn't done it. So they thought, we need to race the thing. And it seems to be part and parcel of what I've always thought the heritage of Honda has been. We know the other manufacturers are that way too. So, they started out with putting 4 of those bikes in the 200, and ultimately Dick Mann won that race. It was a struggle to get there, but he won it. And it actually helped build awareness for American Honda in this country. And so I still think race on Sunday, sell on Monday is still legitimate. I know you guys try all the time. You're working with the OEMs, you're talking to them, and we have some involvement. We just don't have the level of involvement that we'd like it used to be. It's a tough question to ask, Chuck, but how do we get these OEMs involved with us? What can we do?
Well, I think one, we just need to keep doing what we're doing. We try and inform the OEMs of where we are, what we're doing with rules, and try and keep in contact with them. But I think a lot of it, Sean, if you go back 7 years ago to where we were, we just had a notification on our social media numbers. You guys did an excellent job building all that stuff up, and we have 1.25 million followers over all our platforms. We're getting more and more spectators to the races. Our TV numbers are good. I think as that continues to grow, it certainly wasn't in that place 7 years ago. It wasn't at that place 3 years ago. So I think as our popularity grows and fans come back to the racetrack, which they are doing, that's when some of the manufacturers will see it as a viable thing to become involved in again. And like I said earlier, we have a variety of classes. So if they don't want to sell a GSX-R 1000 or 1000 sport bike or whatever, then I shouldn't use GSX-R 1000 because Suzuki is a good partner for us. But you know what I mean? If they see the opportunity to market a sport bike, they have that opportunity. If they want to market a bagger, they have that opportunity. If they want to market a twin entry-level bike or a 660, like a Pro did, they have that opportunity. So I think we just, kind of keep going down the road we're going, and sooner or later they'll see the value in what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and that's what I tell people when they ask me the same question. It's like, I think we keep going down the path we've gone down. We've had tremendous growth. We're going to continue to have that growth. And I think if you just keep doing the work, it gets harder and harder to say no, Yeah. And I think we're close to that point now where, if you're a motorcycle manufacturer and you're walking around the paddock at Road America or one of our other big events, you'd have to ask yourself, how can we not be here?
Yeah, I mean, look who's involved now. You got Harley Davidson, Indian, Royal Enfield, Ducati, Suzuki, Yamaha, BMW has looked at the series for a number of years. So, sooner or later, Honda's got to, recognize that, hey, what's going on over here, and they will, It's just. I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing, and we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, and the thing that I've been delighted about, and I even saw it in some of the commentary in that story I wrote in the social media that supported it, is the fact that the fans have kind of taken up that hue and cry to get in touch with the OEMs as well. We see some fans going, yeah, how come so-and-so, OEM isn't involved? You ought to get it involved in this series. So if it's not just us and it's our spectators and fans, then that's you got to keep the consumers happy and give them what they want. So that's part of it as well. So
I do think, Sean, it's important for people to remember, even though you don't see necessarily a factory, Honda in the Superbike grid, for instance, it's not to say they're not supporting the racing. They do post a pretty heavy contingency program for guys that do want to buy their bikes and go participate. So that's the same with the majority of the manufacturers.
Yeah, and you're right, Chuck. I mean, there's many aspects and facets of how they can support our series. I do see that. Sometimes I just look at what's the trucks or whatever, and when I say the team transporters or whatever, and think in terms of the racing. But you're absolutely right. Okay, we're getting close to being out of time, but I need to ask this question. Paul had alluded to it in the beginning of the episode.
Is it another big question, Sean?
It's kind of big. It's kind of big, but it's about the guy who's turning 70 tomorrow, which I cannot believe. Paul mentioned it. I actually wrote a story that I'm going to post tomorrow. Quick little kind of tribute to Kenny that I'm going to put up on the website. But I want to talk to you about Kenny a little bit. First of all, I'm sure you can't believe he's 70 years old. The other thing is, out of all the experiences you've had with Kenny and everything you've gone through with him, can you give me just one really funny story about Kenny? Whatever comes to your mind, just some anecdote about him in honor of his birthday tomorrow. And that's my tough question to end the episode.
I don't know if there's one that stands out, to be honest.
Exactly.
As Paul could attest, Kenny, every day he's either, he's joking or he's got a different type of sense of humor. And he kind of throws that at everybody, really, kind of in the same way. Probably the closer you are to him, the more harsh it is. But it's all in a good way. It's in good fun. But I don't know. He'll probably disagree with this, and it's probably not so funny for him, but it was funny for me. He kind of got me playing golf when, I don't know, back in I guess it would have been the mid 80s or whatever. And at that time, he's a very good golfer, but both myself and Kenny Jr., we ended up around this golf course community up in Copperopolis called Saddle Creek. And when I lived there full time, I had a golf cart so I can get out, and I got to be a pretty good golfer. And then obviously I went away to Austin and lived there for 3 years, and I came back. And when I started, playing again, I finally figured out how to get the best of Kenny, because I figured if I could get the jump on him and beat him the first 2 holes, then he would kind of lose it and start throwing his club or cussing or yelling or, I don't want to do this anymore. So to me, that's, it was probably the only few times I could beat him that I figured out I could. And he'll probably disagree with me, but I think I got his number finally.
Yeah, Sean, he's an impossible person to beat, because he's going to find some way of putting him. He just has a way of, I'll never forget, I played a lot of tennis when I was a teenager, and we were in Europe. It would have been 78, I guess. And so he said, let's go play tennis. So I said, no problem. We were at like the Italian Grand Prix or something. So he somehow, word got out that we were playing tennis. So here I am, just, a teenage kid, and we're at these clay courts in Italy, and there's probably 300 people there watching. So I'm just losing my shit, and he beats me, of course, and he's just riding my ass the entire time. I just feel horrible. There's all these people watching. I can't do anything right. And but that's kind of what he'll do. He can figure out a way of getting in your head. And the next day, I'm like, Kenny, we're going back to play tennis. And nobody knows about it. We're going right now. And we went back and played tennis, and I obviously played better, and I think I even beat him. But That's how he makes it extremely difficult to beat him at anything because.
And for sure, Paul, he wouldn't remember that you beat him at that.
Oh, he
time.
has no clue in his brain. That's completely freaking gone. And meanwhile, I wake up at night in the middle of the night screaming about the time he beat me, with all those people there. So that's the difference.
But obviously, Sean, Kenny is the kind of guy, he's good at everything that he does pretty much. And it is hard to beat him or challenge him. But, I think that's part of why, when all those guys, Wayne, Kenny, John, Junior, it was fun riding mini bikes. I would be part of that too with all those guys. Bubba, lining up with all those guys was like a national, and Kenny would come out ahead most of the time. But what that does, whether it's racquetball or tennis or golf or riding mini bikes, I think he ups everybody's level, ups everybody's game by the way that he does what he does.
Exactly.
He's going to beat you in the end, but he makes you better, for it.
Yeah.
It makes it easier for you to beat the next guy.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Chuck, we're gonna let you escape, and at least from what I can tell, Sean probably gets to keep his job.
I guess I'll wait. I'll reserve judgment when I actually listen to it back.
Well, that's the thing. There was a few times there when he had like one foot on a banana skin and the other on the unemployment line, but I think he might have survived. All right, you guys, take care. Have a safe and happy New Year. And obviously, as always, we will continue our dialogue elsewhere. So you guys.
I just want to say one more thing, Paul. Yeah, thanks to both you guys for the time, and to close it out, I just want to share my condolences as well with the Hayden family. Earl, especially in Europe, he was always somebody that was you'd look forward to talking to. He's an awesome guy. Great family all around, but Earl's going to surely be missed. So
awesome. All right, boys. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.